In this video, I'm going to be explaining my thoughts as to why the one-handed backhand in tennis has become so rare now compared to what it was back in its heyday. Now, one of the reasons that I think this is that if you look at the top 10 ATP players at the time of the recording, this is October of 2024. So if you look at it, there's only one person in the top 10 ATP players that actually uses a one-handed backhand right now, and that is going to be Grigor Dimitrov. He comes in rounding out this list at the bottom on that slot at number 10. So it's very rare to see anymore now any player using a one-handed backhand that is in the top 10. Grigor's holding strong, but there have been times where the one-handed backhand has slipped out of the top 10 and no one in there has been using it. And one of the reasons I think this is because the game of tennis has changed so much. Now in the game of tennis, there's a lot more focus on use of topspin, and the one-handed backhand is not necessarily the most useful against topspin, especially when the ball bounces and then it gets extremely high on the backhand side. It's very hard to actually hit a decent or clean shot with the one-handed backhand because of how much you have to be in position, how much the one-handed backhand requires of the player in order to be used effectively. With this change and the much higher focus on topspin, it's very hard, especially for newer players and beginners, to just get into the game and learn a one-handed backhand because they may not necessarily want to take the full amount of time that's needed to learn the fundamentals of the one-handed backhand and be as precise as you need to be for this. Whereas with the two-handed backhand, you have a little bit of an easier time learning because you have the second hand to help stabilize the racket. You can kind of use it in a little bit more scenarios rather than the one-handed backhand, which can sometimes be limited. And the two-handed backhand, most people feel, as of now in today's game, is just the better option to go with because it is a more all-around style of racket movement that can be used in almost any single scenario. With it also being harder for beginners to learn, I also want to say it's because it's a lot harder for coaches to teach it, especially if they didn't grow up learning how to do a one-handed backhand. You do have a lot of coaches, especially if they've been around in the industry for a long time. They love the one-handed backhand and they absolutely love it for themselves. But they will have adapted their coaching to teach the two-handed backhand because they know it is more what the game right now is requiring, whereas they keep their one-handed backhand for themselves. And then once their student gets up to a certain level and they feel comfortable that the student is able to maximize the playing ability of a one-handed backhand, that's when they'll begin to teach it. They don't necessarily start with it anymore. And because most people don't start with it, that's why I think it's a lot harder for them to actually go forward and just use a one-handed backhand as effectively as it used to be when that was the dominant way people played tennis. Right now, because of how much more focus on topspin there is, how faster the game has gotten, how much more powerful everything is coming at you, whether it be from the racket technology, the string technology, as well as the advancements in the physicality of the level of player that you're playing against, the two-handed backhand just tends to be a little bit more well-rounded against all of those styles of play, especially on the return of serve. Now, the return of serve is a big one. The serve is where most people get a lot of their points. They can sometimes be free, they're easy, especially if you are someone who's very good at either using kick serves, just flat serves or slice serves, and just getting those free points. But with how much rackets and strings are helping to put spin not only onto the ground strokes but the serve as well, the one-handed backhand still faces the same problem to where it is very hard to get that into a position effectively because of how high the ball is bouncing, how fast the ball is coming at you, and how precise you have to be with that timing on the one-handed backhand. The two-handed backhand is kind of a little bit more of the cheater's way of doing it because you have the second hand on the racket. Granted, you don't have as much length or as much reach as the one-hander, but you have a little bit more of a stable racket. You can just direct the ball or control it a little bit easier and deflect the ball back because you have the extra stability, the extra weight, and you don't have to necessarily worry about being as precise with your timing as on the one-handed backhand. The two-handed backhand you can use in almost any scenario and still hit a decent shot, whereas with the one-handed backhand, if you're off even a little bit, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to personally just get the same quality of shot that you would get from a two-handed backhand, especially on the serve. When Roger Federer, he was playing with it, he recognized that his one-handed backhand was one of the drawbacks to his game, and so he spent years and years and years just trying to perfect it, as well as to find different ways to counteract the new age of the game that was so heavily reliant on topspin and everything, because he knew it was harder for him to actually just use his backhand effectively. By the time he retired, he was figuring it out, and he pretty much had figured it out, and he was also changing rackets and technology just a little bit to help him with that. But it was mainly just focusing on his technique, his timing, and just figuring out some way to adapt to the new style of game, this new style of player that was so heavily reliant on topspin and spin, and just how the game has changed from when he grew up playing, where the one-handed backhand was the most effective backhand at the time. You never really saw a two-handed backhand because it didn't necessarily exist that much. And so, with that being said, that's kind of where I'm thinking why we see the one-handed backhand not as much anymore. I don't see it too often, whether I'm playing at club level play, or if I see high schoolers, college players playing with it. Every so often I'll see a few videos online of like challengers or some people on the professional tour that do use the one-handed backhand. And so it's still around. I'm not saying it's gone completely. I'm just saying it's a lot harder to find someone that's going to be using it, because the game of tennis has evolved, and right now the two-handed backhand is dominating in almost every facet. But that being said, I'd love to know your thoughts on why you think that the one-handed backhand may be going away a little bit more every year or so. If you have any questions, or you just want to say what you think, leave a comment down below so that we can talk about, see what's going on, see what we all can think of. And if you like the video, leave a like on it, as well as subscribe to the channel so that we can grow this channel, get the information out there from the people that have it to the people that need it. There's a lot of tennis misinformation in the tennis community, so I took it upon myself to make this channel so that we can get rid of that and get the information out there from the people that have it to the people that need it. And with that being said, as always, take care.